Welcome to Family History Mysteries, a podcast that tells the stories uncovered through family history research, the unexpected stories of everyday people. I am an avid family historian who has been compiling my family tree for over 15 years, with nearly 20,000 people recorded in my trees. And please put a review on my podcast. That will certainly help in getting the word out there and creating more listenership. Episode 196, Robert Mills, Part 1. Warning, this episode contains themes that may be distressing for some. Many thanks to Peter Mills, who assisted me with this episode. Peter has published clips on YouTube on his ancestors, and he's the great-great-grandson of Robert Mills, and I'll put a link up on my show notes. I came across the Mills family when they suffered two tragedies in 1864. Robert Mills's son Alfred, who was 15, drowned in the Merri River near Warrnambool in Victoria, and only a few days later, Robert Mills committed suicide by taking strychnine. Robert Mills was the son of John Mills and Catherine Curtis. The information that he gave on his marriage certificate for his second marriage was that he was born in 1828 in Liverpool, England. His father was a sailor, and on his death certificate, in which his second wife was the informant, it stated he was born in 1826 and he'd lived in the Australian colonies for 36 and a half years of his 38 years, therefore being 1.5 when he was born in Australia. The information on his parents is consistent. I found a shipping record for a John Mills, a labourer, sailing from London on the Royal Admiral on the 24th of September 1837 and arriving at Port Adelaide on the 17th of January 1838. However, these dates are not consistent with the death certificate provided by Robert's second wife. Robert Mills married Sarah Elizabeth Shepherd in South Australia in 1847, when she was 18 and Robert 21. This information was obtained from Sarah's death certificate. There is no formal document that can be found to validate that Robert and Sarah married in South Australia in that year. What is also more confusing is there is a Sarah Shepherd who arrived in South Australia, but arrived on the 26th of December 1849 on the Harry Lorrequer. The record states she was born in Lancashire, England. So is the death record information slightly inaccurate? And Emma Shepherd is actually listed with this Sarah Shepherd, who was 22, on the same ship. So possibly did she come out with a cousin? Again, there's no record of an Emma Shepherd marrying in South Australia or anywhere in the colony at that time. She just seems to disappear from all records. On Sarah's death certificate, it also stated her father was James William Shepherd. I cannot link a James William Shepherd from England that had a daughter, Sarah Shepherd. Then to complicate things further, Sarah's also referred to as Elizabeth in some of the formal documents. And I was hoping that I would get to their children and be able to validate some of the information through the birth certificates, as birth certificates and marriage certificates are far more accurate, as it is the people living at the time that are informing of the information of their parents or where they came from or their birth year. Death certificates are tricky, and I usually don't use death certificate information as definitive information, as it's usually an older child or it could be a spouse or a second spouse that is informing on the death certificate and may not have fully accurate information. The records state that the first son, Alfred, was born in Victoria in 1849, but if you go online to the grave records, it says that not only was Alfred the first son born in England, but all their children were born in England. So that further confuses things as well, and it certainly goes against the information that we have that Robert came out to Australia with his parents at the age of 1.5 and married Sarah Shepherd in South Australia. There is a record in the South Australian hospital admissions showing a Sarah Mills, aged 21, on the 17th of January 1852 in Adelaide, being admitted for hysteria. Her occupation is shown as a servant. So again, this doesn't quite marry up because that would mean that she was born in 1831 based on the hospital admission record, not 1829, so it is close. And if this record is in fact Robert Mills's wife, then it does show that she in fact married him. So Robert and Sarah had 8 children together, with only 4 of those children surviving into adulthood. Sarah died on the 15th of August 1857 at Woolsthorpe, Victoria, near Warrnambool, from hemorrhaging after childbirth, and she was aged only 28. Their child Edwin was stillborn in July 1857. So she died only a matter of a few weeks after the death of her child. So the other record that is possible that I found for Robert Mills's father, John Mills, was there was an entry of a death record in the Melbourne Age on the 13th of November 1886. John Mills at Russell Street, Mount Erica, Paran, in his 86th year. However, going into the Victorian births, deaths and marriages records, there's no other information added for this John Mills. Everything's listed as unknown other than his age. What is more definitive is that Robert Mills, after the death of his wife, married Isabella Christina McRae at Kilmorey Station near Spring Creek in Victoria on the 3rd of January 1859. Robert was 33 and Isabella 32. Robert was listed as a stock rider at the time of their marriage. Isabella was Scottish and she immigrated aged 28 on the Athlete, arriving in Portland, Victoria on the 9th of February 1855, and she was initially assigned to W. Beaver at Belfast, now known as Port Fairy. So it is clear when looking at the death information or the marriage information of the children of Robert Mills that it seems that they didn't stay in South Australia long, and it seems that he commenced his employment at Kilmorey Station quite soon after his first marriage. On the 8th of October 1864 in the Melbourne Leader, it announces from Warrnambool a tragedy. Word is received in town on Tuesday last that a man named Robert Mills, living at Kilmorey Station, had committed suicide on the previous day by taking strychnine. Strange to say, a son of the above, Alfred Mills, a lad of about 14, is supposed to have been drowned in the Merri River on Sunday last. He was in the employ of James Bateman Esquire, and it is supposed fell into the river. He was in a boat on that day and has never been seen since, and the boat was found drifting down the river. The body has not yet been recovered. The elder Mills has left a widow and a large family. So upon Robert's death, his death notice states that he was born in 1829 in Liverpool, England, whereas on his marriage certificate to Isabella, he stated that he was born in 1828 in Liverpool, England, and his death was on the 26th of September 1864. He was buried in the Woolsthorpe Cemetery. So he died at Woodford, near Warrnambool. There was an inquest into the death of Robert Mills, and his wife Isabella was examined on the 28th of September 1864 at Woolsthorpe. Her oath states, "I am the widow of the deceased and reside at Kilmorey Station near Woolsthorpe. On Thursday last, Mr. Stevens, the overseer at the station, gave liberty to my husband, who was then complaining of not being well, to go and see a medical man. My husband returned on Monday morning about 6 o'clock. I was not up at the time. I had not been very well on the Saturday and had sent for him to the public house kept by Mr. Burkett Winslow, where my husband arrived. He inquired if I was better, and then he lay down on a bed in the room. He told me he'd come home to die. I asked if he would have some tea, and he said he did not want any tea, but to bring him a cup of water. I took him the water, and he told me to go outside and shut the door of the bedroom, that he wanted to be quiet. I did not suspect at the time that he was going to take poison. About 10 o'clock I went into the room and I saw a bottle containing strychnine on the table. The bottle now produced is the same. It had no label. I asked him what he was doing with it, and he said he had taken some and was going to bid me goodbye. He appeared at the time very flushed in the face. I went out directly and called a carpenter named William Keelaw, who was working outside, and told him what had occurred. He told me he did not think it was the effects of poison, but from his having been drinking 2 or 3 days. I asked him again if he'd taken the poison, and he said he had, and I sent away for Mr. Stevens and Alexander Scott, as my husband told Scott that he'd taken the strychnine. Mr. Stevens went to Warrnambool for a doctor. I mixed up some mustard and water, but he would not take it for an hour. At about 11 o'clock, spasms came, and during the fits he became black in the face. He breathed very hard and frothed at the mouth. He continued to get worse until 1 p.m. when he died after one of the fits. He was sensible to the last and was sorry for what he had done and prayed for mercy and forgiveness. I did not scold him when he came home for being drinking. I only told him that he ought not be spending his money at the public house, but I believe he had taken the strychnine before then. I was present at his death." And she made her mark as her signature. And William Keylor also stated on oath that he was a carpenter residing at Grasmere. "I was at work at Kilmorey on Monday last. Between 9 and 10 o'clock that morning, Mrs. Mills called me into the kitchen and told me that her husband had taken strychnine. I went to the bedroom door and looked in. Robert Mills was lying on a bed, and he was then working with his arms and breathing heavily. I said that I thought he had the horrors from drink. We sent a son of Robert Mills for Mr. Stevens and Scott, and when they came, Mr. Stevens went away for a doctor to Warrnambool directly. I went again to my work, but came in now and then to see him. He became gradually worse. He had very severe fits and died after one of them a little after 1 p.m. I asked him if he had taken strychnine. He told me he had. I asked him why he had done so, and he said that his wife had said something to him when he came home, and that was the cause. I have been working near the house of Robert Mills for the last 6 or 7 weeks, and he and his wife appeared to live on good terms. When he died, I went down and told the doctor, who was on his way up, that Mills was dead." William Keylor. So Robert's children with Sarah that survived into adulthood. Charles was born in 1851 at Kilmorey Station at Woolsthorpe, and this is based on his marriage certificate information, even though a website that has grave information says that he was born in 1854 in England. There is no registration for his birth, like his older brother Alfred, but when his father died he was 13, so the year that he was born is based on Robert's death certificate information. He married Anne Charlotte Sharp in January 1889 at Alfred. He stated his parents were Robert Mills, a stockman, and Elizabeth Sarah Curtis. And he was a butcher at the time of their marriage. He was 35 and Anne was 30. Now what's interesting here on this marriage certificate information is that Robert's first wife was Sarah Elizabeth Shepherd. However, on his marriage certificate, he's saying his mother was Elizabeth Sarah Curtis. Was there confusion because they didn't know their mother? She died when they were so young. Have they got mixed up between Robert Mills's mother and their own mother? Charles and Anne had 2 children, Lindsay in 1890, who is Peter Mills's grandfather, and Adeline in 1896. And Charles died on the 15th of December 1932 at Alfred, Victoria, aged 81. The next children born were twins. They were born in 1854 in Woolsthorpe, Victoria, but the information through the burial site says that Adeline and her brother were born in July 1853 in the Stroud district of Gloucestershire in England. So again, I cannot find definitive records either way. Adeline died on the 5th of August 1887 at the age of only 34 of ulceration of the bladder at Warrnambool in Victoria. She'd married Henry Murfitt in 1875, but they had no children. Her death record states that her parents were Robert Mills and Sarah Elizabeth Curtis. So again, that Curtis surname is coming up. The twin James is also listed on family trees as being born in 1854 in Woolsthorpe. He married Rosina Thwaites in 1878 and they had 6 children. In 1909, they were living at Southern Cross, where James owned a dairy, and he died on the 29th of January 1939 at Koroit in Victoria at the age of 85. James actually has an obituary that was published in the Portland Guardian on the 9th of February 1939 and gives a little bit of an idea of his birth and his background and childhood. One of the oldest Australian-born natives, Mr. James Mills, died at Koroit on Tuesday, aged 86. He was a native of Winslow and lived in this district all his life. Blacks were numerous when he was a boy, and he had many encounters with dingoes in what was known as the Wickham Scrub. He was employed at the nearby station of Kilmorey, then owned by Mr. John Bateman. Later he worked for Mr. Moran when that gentleman kept a racing stable at Mount Taurus. It was a tough school and Mr. Mills had numerous spills, but had to crack hardy and persevere with the business. In his boyhood days, he related the surrounding swamps were alive with wildfowl, including geese, the eggs of which he waded in to collect. The blacks were inclined to resent him doing this, evidently regarding the collecting of these eggs as their prerogative. Later he was employed stock droving and carting to the diggings,
when he married a daughter of the late Simon Thwaites, who was one of the larger landholders in the district in the early days. He settled down farming and dairying at Barrels Flat Road and followed the occupation successfully till he retired several years ago and came to live in Koroit. His reminiscences of his early life and adventures were most interesting to listen to, and he never overlooked the humorous aspects associated with them. So that obituary actually gave a good insight and a little bit more of a definitive piece of information to say that these children were in fact born at Woolsthorpe in Victoria and not England. The fourth child was Elizabeth Catherine Mills. She was born in 1856 at Kilmorey Station. She married Carl William Hempel, who was born in Germany in Warrnambool in August 1874. The information on the marriage certificate states that Elizabeth's parents were Robert Mills and Elizabeth Ann Curtis. Same surname, consistently through all the children, but now Elizabeth Ann. And it also stated that Elizabeth was a servant. Her sister Adeline was a witness to their marriage, and Elizabeth and Carl had 7 children. Elizabeth was a midwife and lived in Warrnambool, and she died in 1931 at Prahran, Victoria at the age of 75. Robert's children with Isabella. He only had 2 girls with Isabella. The first was Jane Mills, who was born in 1859 at Woodford in Victoria. However, I am unable to find any further information on Jane, so I'm presuming that she may have died as an infant. Their next child was Bessie Jean Kennedy Mills, who was born in 1863 in Warrnambool. She married John Yeoman in 1899. John was a widower whose wife died in 1888, and he had 4 children from his first marriage. John was 42 and Bessie 38 when they married, and they both listed their occupation as photographers. Robert Mills was listed as a station manager on their marriage certificate. However, he had passed away by this point. The marriage notice in the Melbourne Argus on the 30th of December 1899. On the 6th of December at the Baptist Manse in Warrnambool, John Yeoman of Prahran, second eldest son of the late John Yeoman, to Bessie, daughter of the late Robert Mills of Woolsthorpe, Victoria. John Yeoman died in October 1933 at his home in Malvern. He was 76, and upon his death he was noted as one of Melbourne's best-known photographers. It says he was the proprietor of Eden Studios in Swanston Street and had many suburban studios, including one in Clarendon Street that he gave up many years ago. He retired from active business 16 years ago and leaves a widow and a grown-up family. His estate was announced in the paper on the 26th of January 1934. John Yeoman, late of Wattle Tree Road, East Malvern, left real estate valued at £15,583 and personal property of £3,893 to his widow and children, subject to gifts to relatives. So he did quite well for himself in his photography business. Bessie died on the 22nd of December 1945 at Malvern East at the age of 83. Now, what is very interesting is that 7 years after the death of Robert Mills, there was an article that was put into the Warrnambool Advertiser, and it was actually copied and published in Victorian and South Australian papers. Sir Roger Tichborne, dead and buried. The Warrnambool Advertiser finishes the following statement. In the year 1859 at Kilmorey Station, Spring Creek, near Winslow, there was married by a Wesleyan minister, one Robert Mills to Isabella McRae, the same Rob Mills, having been previously married to one Catherine Curtis, and by whom he had 7 children, 6 of whom were alive at his second marriage. Although a man of extremely dissolute habits and associating by preference with the lowest companions, yet in his sober moments he gave evidence of having moved in a very different sphere. He could speak French fluently, was a capital singer, a splendid horseman, and handy in various mechanic arts. One day, sometime after their marriage, he was about leaving his home, as was his custom periodically, and he said to his wife that if anyone called and asked for Tom Castro, to say that she didn't know anything about such a man. On another occasion, he told her he had married under an assumed name, and he said he had been wrecked in the Bella coming from Valparaiso, and was 2 or 3 days on a barren island without food, and was saved by tying a red shirt to an oar, in consequence of which he always wore a red shirt. Once he casually mentioned his acquaintance with Lord Bellew. Lastly, Rob Mills was tattooed on his arm with the emblems of faith, hope and charity, and also RCT. His body lies at Spring Creek near Winslow beside his first wife. In the Melbourne Age, this article featured on the 10th of October 1872, and the preface for this article said, "If the following statement which appeared in the Age on the 2nd of October be true, the Tichborne romance assumes quite another phase. It is stated that a woman living in the Western District claims to be the widow of the claimant. She has, it is alleged, in her possession a photograph of Roger Tichborne and also those of other members of the family." So who was Sir Roger Tichborne? Well, he was an heir to a vast fortune of the Tichborne and Doughty estates in Hampshire, England in the late 1860s. It was a Catholic noble family and holders of England's 9th largest fortune. The Tichbornes could trace their ancestry back to the Norman conquest. Sir Roger was the son of Sir James Tichborne and his French wife, Henriette. As the fourth of 7 sons, Sir James was not expected to inherit the title, and neither was his wilful wife, who hated all things English, prepared to join him in England on his accession, but remained in France, where she continued to raise her 2 sons, Roger and Alfred, as Frenchmen. Roger Tichborne was a delicate, sensitive boy, tall and slim, with black hair and blue eyes. When he was 15, his father enticed him to England, where he was enrolled in a strict Jesuit seminary. There he eventually mastered English, albeit with a strong French accent, and excelled in Latin. After a stint in the Dragoons, and disheartened over a hopeless romance with his cousin Catherine Doughty, Roger decided to break free of his mother's suffocating hold and travel to South America. He was a prolific correspondent and he constantly sent home detailed letters until, in April 1854, in a passage back to New York City, the ship La Bella was wrecked and only a handful of survivors were picked up from a passing ship headed for Melbourne, Australia. Word had got back to England that Sir Roger had been lost at sea. After his father's death in 1862, Roger's mother refused to believe her son was dead and from 1863 advertised worldwide in newspapers seeking news of him. And the advertisement from the Sydney Morning Herald on the 26th of July, 1865 says, "A handsome reward will be given to any person who can furnish such information as will discover the fate of Roger Charles Tichborne. He sailed from the port of Rio de Janeiro on the 20th of April 1854 in the ship La Bella and has never been heard of since. But a report reached England to the effect that a portion of the crew and passengers of a vessel of that name were picked up by a vessel bound to Australia, Melbourne, it is believed, and it is not known whether the said Roger Charles Tichborne was amongst the drowned or saved. He would at the present time be about 32 years of age, is of a delicate constitution, rather tall, very light brown hair and blue eyes. Mr. Tichborne is the son of Sir James Tichborne, now deceased, and is heir to all of his estates. The advertiser is instructed to state that a most liberal reward will be given to any information that may definitely point out his fate. Gentlemen in a position to refer to shipping reports may be able to find some record of the saving of the shipwrecked persons from the La Bella, and a very careful search, if with a successful result, will amply repay anyone who will take the trouble to investigate the matter." All replies to be addressed to Mr. Arthur Cubitt, Missing Friends Office, Bridge Street, Sydney, New South Wales. So keeping in mind that this is 9 months after the death of Robert Mills. William Gibbs, an Australian solicitor, sent Lady Tichborne a letter in November 1865 stating that a man who claimed to be her son had contacted him. This man was a butcher from Wagga Wagga and called himself Tom Castro. Although he was physically larger than Sir Roger, had lighter hair and spoke no French, these discrepancies did not bother Lady Tichborne, who had not seen her lost son for more than 10 years. In January 1867, the claimant, from Australia, with his wife and family, reached Paris, where he was acknowledged by Lady Tichborne to be the lost son. He visited the Tichborne estates and acquired some powerful supporters, including the Tichborne's family's own solicitor, Edward Hopkins, and Andrew Bogle, a former servant of Sir Roger's uncle. Other members of the Tichborne family, however, asserted that he was an impostor and obtained evidence to try and prove that he was Arthur Orton, who had deserted ship at Valparaiso, Chile in 1849. They alleged that Orton had been kindly received at Melipilla, Chile, by a family called Castro, whose name he took after he'd gone to Australia. There ended up being quite a sensational court case in England where this Tom Castro staked his claim for the fortune. More than 100 persons swore that the claimant was Roger Tichborne. This court case lasted from 1867 to April 1873, making it one of the longest court cases in history and making it world news. The trial lasted in total 291 days. In part 2, I'll be covering all of the main statements in the case and information from people in Australia, including another little twist in the story where a lady claimed a link to Roger Tichborne, who was living in Victoria at the time.
If you are interested in sharing your story on my podcast Family History Mysteries, please go to my Facebook page and send me a message. If you would like some assistance in filling in the gaps in your family tree to see what mysteries you solve, please get in touch. And don't forget, you can have early access to episodes by subscribing, and you'll also gain access to bonus episodes.